One day you will be forgotten. Everything that you have done, every accomplishment that you have had, every success, every failure, every joy, every celebration, the pain and the mountaintops will be forgotten. It takes about 100 years or so, they say, but in about 2 or 3 generations, the significant details of your life will go by the wayside. You soon become only a list, and maybe in Ancestry.com, you discover that they're your great-great-grandfather or grandmother, and then you are forgotten. Normally, we go to church to be encouraged. Like, that worship was so great, and then I just dropped that bomb on you. But that is true, right? It is tough. We fight against. We pretend like it's not true. We pretend that death is not coming, but it is. All of us will one day be forgotten. And that is actually what this message is all about, because we are not going to pretend like that isn't true, but that we are actually going to believe it is. And so if it is true, every single thing we do actually has more significance, because we will be forgotten, because the significant parts will go wayside. Then the question we need to ask ourselves is, what are we doing to leave a legacy? This message is all about the impact we are having right now in order to make an investment into the future. The choices, the decisions, the way we do things, the impact we have today can actually create a legacy and invest into the future to outlast us. That long after we are forgotten, our legacy, our impact, the choices and decisions right now can make an investment into the future. And if that sounds captivating, I encourage you to lean into this message and think deeply how you can make an impact today, tomorrow, and the weeks and years to come. And so today, I've gotten the incredible privilege to dive into a topic that I am truly passionate about. And that is about investing into the next generation. It is not just because I'm the youth pastor of our church. I truly believe it is what God calls us to do. So if you're a follower of Jesus, listening to my voice, this is not only something nice to do, but an obligation. If we're going to see more and more people follow Jesus, if the church is going to go the way of not being forgotten, then it is an obligation that we must pick up and carry with us. A responsibility that is not just for some of us, but for all of us. Whether parent, grandparent, or even no children, if you are a follower of Jesus, it is all of our responsibilities. Because if I want to leave any legacy for my life, it is this: a legacy of faith. So today, that is what we are going to talk about. Because I truly believe if we do this, if we make decisions down to impact our future, to impact our next generation, then long after we are forgotten, our legacy of faith will continue forward. If you're invested, if you're a parent, a teacher, and a babysitter, in any way interact with the next generation, the reality is that they are facing a tougher and more difficult and more challenging than maybe any generation before. The sad life for kids right now. And yet God has not given up on them. God has not given up on them. And I truly believe that we can do a lot better than what we are doing right now. I say that for my own life when it is my ministry of serving young lives. Because if that is the reality that they're facing, if that is the world that they have at their fingertips, if that is their school lives, their family lives, their friend lives, then we can and we must do better. If we're going to leave a legacy of faith, it has to start right now. It is not just my opinion, a student pastor's perspective, but it's actually God's opinion. And I want to show you that today from His Word. So we are continuing our series in the book of Psalms, talking about Psalm 78. I want to specifically look at verse 1 to 7. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there with me. It begins in verse 1 saying, "My people hear my teaching. Listen to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth with a parable. I will utter hidden things, things from old, the things we have heard and known, things of our ancestors have told us. We will not hide them from their descendants. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, His power and the wonders He has done. He decreed statutes for Jacob and established the law in Israel, which he commanded our ancestors to teach their children so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. Then they would put their trust in God and would not forget his deeds, but would keep his command. You see, it is our responsibility as followers of Jesus, believers of God, as people of faith, to pass our beliefs down to the next generation. It is not our job to hide or hold back our beliefs, to actually tell our descendants, our next generation, the generations even after, about what the deeds of the Lord, the way that God has moved throughout history and in our lives, his power, who he is, his character traits, and the wonders that he has done. You see, we're only one generation away from the church ending. Have you ever thought about that? That if we don't pass down our faith, one day we will be forgotten. We will no longer be here. And if the next generation will say, hey, I'm for Jesus, then our church, the church, will end. So if we are going to leave a legacy of faith, this is true, then we can't give up, so we don't give up. Instead, we pass it down. It's like a relay race where you have a group of people or four runners that have a baton. They have this object, this piece, and they're handing it to one another to complete the race. If they drop the baton, they're disqualified. And if they make it all the way through, they win the race. I feel like this is sometimes how we feel when we are passed down our faith. That we're running along fine, things are going good. Sometimes we win the race and things happen in our life that we celebrate. But then when we try to make that pass to the next generation, we drop it, just like a baton. We make mistakes, we yell, we don't live out our faith. We miss church for weeks or months and some even years. Whatever it is, we all mess up. We don't give the best example of what it looked like to follow Jesus. We drop the baton, and a lot of us feel like I was doing my best, but I just can't do it. We are going to make mistakes, but that doesn't mean we are out of the race. I want to look back at verse 5 if you would go there with me. It says, he decreed statutes for Jacob and established the law in Israel, which he commanded our ancestors to teach their children. Look at who it names in this passage, Jacob. If you know anything about Jacob, he was a guy that stole his brother's birthright and inheritance by deceiving his old blind father, by dressing up as his brother and acting like him, just so he can receive his father's inheritance. And yet, this is the example that the writer of the Psalms tells us how we are supposed to be like. We're supposed to be like Jacob, who is passing it on to his children. This is one of my favorite things about the Bible that I love so much. It's not just filled with perfect people. Think about it. Adam and Eve are in the garden doing great, and then they sin and mess up. And what happens next? Then we start to read about brothers starting to kill one another. Then after that, God calls Abraham. Abraham lied twice, even after his son Isaac pretends that his wife is his sister. Jacob stole a birthright. Jacob's son sold one of his brothers into slavery. Moses was a murderer. And that is just in Genesis and Exodus. The rest of the Bible has a lot more imperfect people doing amazing things for God. So if those are the ancestors that God commanded to teach their children about faith and God, then that means we can still do it too. Yes, we mess up. Yes, we make mistakes. Yes, we're not going to be perfect examples for our children or grandchildren. People of this church might know things about you that you don't want anyone else to know. But the threshold for telling our kids, for passing the baton, is not perfection. It's real, authentic faith in spite of imperfection. It says, I may not be perfect, but God is perfect. I may make mistakes, but God never does. I am just in need of salvation as much as you. And yet I believe, and yes, I have questions and doubts, confusions, and I don't have the answers. But I encourage you, as I have, to trust the God that does, that meets us in our doubts and questions. Look at verse 6 and 7, where it says, so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. Then they put their trust in God and would not forget his deeds, but would keep his commands. You see, the chain keeps going. It is not about the perfect faith to your children. It is not about a shiny example, a bright, shiny face all the time. It is about real, authentic faith for our kids and the next generation. It is about a faith that wrestles with tough questions. It is about a faith that does not have all the answers, but trusts the God that does. Let me tell you, after working with our students, all they want is something real. In a world of fake news, fake realities, and nonsense, they just want something real. They want to be seen for who they really are, not for who they pretend to be, or what the city and the communities and the world makes them out to be. They want a God that answers real, tough questions, not just a smiley face on Sunday morning. Please, be happy on Sunday morning, but if you're not, then be authentic and be real to who you are. So even when you drop the baton, pick it right back up and keep passing it on. As a youth pastor, one of the numbers that keeps me up at night is 50 to 70%. Have you ever heard this stat with youth ministry? It is that 50 to 70% of high school students, when they get to university, they will drop away from church attendance and will lose their faith. It breaks my heart knowing that over half of our students, over 7 to 10 of them, are losing their faith once they leave my ministry. And I hope it breaks yours too. Because our students are facing a world that is more difficult and tough and so many other things like never before. They need a vibrant faith that answers tough questions, that loves people, that cares for people, that goes out and seeks and cares for the city. They need a faith like the faith that is presented in the Bible. And as hard and as difficult as that is, it is not unique to a problem that we just started facing a couple years ago. I'd like to jump over to Judges 2 if you would with me. This is a problem that Christians and believers in God have faced all of the history. Judges 2, 10 to 11 says that after that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Verse 11 says that then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. Baals were the gods of people that were around them. You see, what happens is if we give up, if we don't pass it on down, if we say they are facing problems that I am just, not equipped for, if we don't pass it on now, we will have a generation that is rising up who doesn't know the Lord or his good deeds. This is a problem then in Judges, and you look to see what happens. God sends judge after judge after judge to call his people back to the way of his living, to say, I have something better than what is going on right now. The same thing is true for the next generation right now. We are increasingly seeing a generation that is growing up that doesn't have any faith, that doesn't believe, that doesn't know who God is or what he had done. But don't lose hope. God is not done. He is working in the lives of our kids and students powerfully. It is actually in the same way then he did then. Look at Judges 2:7 a little bit before. To the people served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua, and of the elders who outlived him, and who had seen all the greatest things he has done for Israel. That is all great. But look at what happens in verse 8 right after that, where it reads, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. With Joshua, the faith of that community died too. God had to pull them back. God had to rewind them of who he was, how he was working within their lives and their community, and how he designated them as a special people to point people to him. And for so many of the next generation, as the same is true. Faith is dead. They don't see it vibrantly in their lives. Maybe for many of us, faith came later in life. We didn't have good examples, good parents, good ideas of what it looks like to follow Jesus. Yet God found us a way. But what if our students and kids can have an example like you and like me, not perfect, but real and following and chasing after Jesus? And this is true. I want this to be true for our church, that we would be the example we wish we had. Think about all the problems you faced growing up, all the difficulty and pain. What if you had somebody in your life that was invested? Somebody that was invested into your life and supported you, loved you, and cared for you. The only reason I stand in front of you today was because of one person being an example of faith in my life and leading me through those tough questions and conversations. I want to wrap up with a quote from Benjamin Franklin. This is something that I have led my ministry with. And it says that a good example is the best sermon. We can stand up here as pastors and teach God's words and encourage people. But what if those people had a life, an example right in front of them of what it looked like to follow Jesus? And some of you are doing that already. Just recently, we had, a couple months ago, did a youth retreat. We had more students than we've ever had before. And during that time, we had over 15 students accept or re-accept Christ into their lives. We had 5 students, acknowledge a desire to be baptized. But just this past weekend, I baptized one. And this specifically, and I won't share her name, but this young girl in grade 6 came in with just so many chains. Over the weekend, God just really moved in her, and she broke free of that and just accepted Christ into her life and acknowledged a desire to be baptized. And on the way home, her grandma had actually seen the good works of the Lord in her life. And she had emailed me actually sharing about how this young life doesn't have a way to be at church weekly or youth ministry weekly. But this grandma has acknowledged that she needs to hand off the baton. She's actually going to create a way for this young girl to be at youth every single week this coming school year. This grandma is going to drive her granddaughter every single week so that she can learn about the good deeds of the Lord. She is handing off the baton by just driving her every single week. We have people that were a part of our nursery. They moved on to K-5, a part of our junior high or senior high. They're now a part of our young adults, and they even serve in our church and in our worship ministry. They've had different pastors and leaders and mentors invest into them. This past week, our own church, Elim, had over 200 people under the age of 24 years old walk through a set of doors. It might be at some different location because we're all over the place, but we had over 200 from nursery all the way up to our young adults under the age of 24 come through, ready to hear more about the Lord, wanting an answer to those tough questions. The next generation is hungry for something like faith. They want purpose. They want identity. They want a reason to live. And you know who offers all of that in abundance? Jesus. So, what if we could be an example of what it looks like to follow, even if we don't have the answers? Even if we don't have kids ourselves, even if you're a young life at 30 or 25 and you're not even married, how can we be an example to the next generation? Because it truly will take all of us to pass down our faith to the next generation. Let's pray. Lord, I just thank you so much that we can gather here online and hear about your word. I thank you for the Psalms and these songs that we worship and we learn through. I pray right now for our next generation, that you would just speak to them and provide for them, that you would just make your presence known in their lives. I pray for our families, our parents, our grandparents, our siblings. I pray for the ones that don't have kids. I pray for the ones that are older like myself, that are still a part of the next generation, but are also serving them and investing in them. I pray just a blessing over those people. Would you just speak to the ones that are investing in our young lives and our young people today? I pray as we leave today that we would be reminded of your good word, of your good deeds that you share with us in the Psalms. I thank you for this past series. I pray that there would be some sort of connection in our own lives, that through the past 5 weeks from Pastor Marvin and Pastor Steve, that there would be something that they shared that we would be able to take and put into effect in our lives right now. I Pray as we go on from today that we would just be focused on you, and that your face would just shine upon us in every single thing we do. I pray all these things, and amen. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so incredibly proud of our next generation, and I cannot wait to see what the years to come and what the Lord has in store for them.